Sometimes, the most dangerous choice a man could make on the frontier was the simplest, whether to offer water to a stranger. Part 1. The Stranger by the Well. The land around Silas Crowell's ranch was as unforgiving as the men who tried to tame it. Dust lay in sheets across the hard earth, every step kicking up the ghosts of 1,000 hoofbeats long gone. The well he had dug with his own hands stood like a solitary promise in that wasteland, a circle of stones that meant life or death, in a place where rain came less often than mercy. That morning, Silas had been mending a fence along the south pasture, his sleeves rolled, sweat dripping down his temples, when he noticed something odd in the dirt. Not coyote tracks, not stray cattle. It was darker, fresher. Blood. He followed it with the slow patience of a man who knew caution meant survival. The trail wound past the barn and led straight toward his well. His rifle felt heavier in his hands with each step, the way it always did when trouble lurked near. Trouble was common currency in the year 1872, and a rancher alone on the frontier had no one to spend it with but himself. When Silas rounded the corner, he froze. A young native lay slumped against the stone wall of the well, his body half in shadow, one arm clutched to a ragged wound in his side. Blood seeped between his fingers in slow rivulets, staining the earth. His other hand reached weakly toward the bucket that dangled just above his head, swinging in the breeze like salvation just out of reach. The boy could not have seen more than 20 summers, but his dark eyes tracked Silas with the wary sharpness of a wolf caught in a trap. They were clouded by pain but alive with something deeper, defiance, or maybe just the will not to die thirsty. Silas's finger hovered over the trigger. He had seen men in town shot for less than harboring a wounded Indian. Every neighbor within 50 miles would have told him the same thing. End it now. Bury the body. Say nothing. It was safer, smarter, expected. But as the boy's lips cracked open and the faintest whisper scraped from his throat, water, Silas felt a pull he could not explain. He remembered the drought of '68, when he himself had gone 3 days without a drop, when his tongue had swollen, and every thought had been of the well he feared had gone dry. The memory of that thirst was carved deeper than any scar. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. The bucket creaked as he drew it up, brimming with the cool gift of the earth. Kneeling beside the stranger, Silas pressed the rim to his lips. The boy drank like a drowning man, each gulp desperate, shuddering, until he drained the bucket dry, and then another, and another still, until at last his trembling hands steadied enough to hold it himself. Silas knew he had already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. By the time the boy knew, the young warrior drew a steady breath. The sun was lowering behind the ridge, painting the sky in streaks of rust and gold. Silas studied him in the fading light and saw what he had missed before. The wound was no accident. Powder burns ringed the torn flesh. This was a bullet hole, delivered at close range. Someone had tried to kill him recently, and if they had followed the trail of blood this far, then they were close. The warrior's gaze shifted toward the horizon, then back to Silas. With a trembling hand, he drew his thumb across his throat in a silent warning. Danger was coming. Silas's chest tightened. His instincts screamed at him to drag the body away, hide the evidence, pretend this never happened. But the boy was too weak to move without tearing the wound wider, and leaving him meant hanging a target on both their backs. That's when Silas heard it. The sound every man on the frontier knew better than his own heartbeat. Hoofbeats, multiple horses. Fast. The warrior heard them too. His eyes widened with fear, and he tried to push himself tighter against the well's shadow, as if the stone might swallow him whole. Blood welled fresh through his fingers. Silas's mind raced. He grabbed the empty bucket and dashed water over the dirt, trying to wash away the trail of crimson. Too late. The riders would be here in minutes. He turned back to the wounded boy. Their eyes locked. and in them Silas saw something he had not expected. Not fear alone. Gratitude. Pure, unguarded gratitude. The hoofbeats drew nearer, rising like thunder over the ridge. Dust billowed in the twilight. 6 riders crested the hill, rifles glinting in the dying Sunday. Silas recognized the man at their head, Sheriff Malcom Harlan. A name spat more than spoken in every saloon from Santa Fe to the Arkansas River. Harlan was known for his iron fist, his quick temper, and his pockets that always seemed heavier after a raid. Lawman in name, outlaw in everything but title, the sheriff reigned in 10 feet away, his pale eyes cold as steel. His men fanned out in a half-circle, hands never straying far from their guns. "Evenin', Crowell," Harlan drawled. "Funny thing, we're trackin' a wounded Indian. Blood trail says he came this way. You wouldn't have seen anything suspicious, would you?" Silas forced his grip to loosen on the rifle resting against his leg. His mouth felt dry as the desert itself. "No Indians here, Sheriff," he said, his voice steady though his pulse hammered in his ears. "Been working the fence all day." Harlan's gaze swept across the ranch yard, lingering on the damp patches of dirt near the well. He smiled thinly. "That so?" Behind Silas, hidden by nothing but the curve of stone and luck, the boy lay silent, breathing shallow. One sound, one slip, and it was over. Harlan swung down from his horse, boots crunching in the gravel. He took 3 slow steps closer, his hand resting easy on the pistol at his hip. "You know what they hang a man for, don't you?" the sheriff said softly. "Harboring a fugitive. Same as treason. Rope don't care if it's white neck or red." Silas said nothing. His whole body coiled tight as a spring. The sheriff's eyes flicked once more toward the well, and then, before he could take another step, a sound broke the tension like glass shattering. The wounded boy spoke, not in English, but in his own tongue. Words that rolled like music, defiant despite the pain. Harlan froze mid-step. For the first time, Silas saw something crack in that mask of arrogance. His face paled, his jaw slackened. The boy's voice carried across the ranch yard, low but steady, as if naming himself carried its own power. Silas didn't understand the words, but he saw the sheriff's reaction, and that was enough to tell him the truth. This was no ordinary warrior. This boy was someone Harlan had not expected to find alive, someone whose name carried weight, and the whole world of the frontier was about to tilt on its axis. Part 2. The Sheriff's Circle. The sheriff was not a man easily rattled. Folks said Malcom Harlan could hold a poker face while staring down a gun barrel, and maybe that was true. But the moment Takoda's voice broke the yard's silence, soft words in his native tongue, the color drained from Harlan's jaw like water slipping off stone. Silas saw it. A crack in the lawman's mask. Small, but real. Takoda shifted against the well, pain etched into every line of him, yet his eyes carried no plea. He had stopped asking for water. Now, he measured the circle of horses, gauging which death might come first. He looked once at Silas, not begging but recognizing. Then his gaze pinned itself to the sheriff. Harlan covered his hesitation with a sneer. "That foreign poetry won't save you," he said. "Blood led us here, and blood'll pay for itself. Crowell, step aside." Silas tightened his grip on the rifle. "You got a warrant?" Harlan chuckled without humor. "I've got a dead colonel and orders from a judge. That's worth more than paper." His boots ground gravel as he stepped forward, pistol dangling like a casual threat. "Now move." The deputies fanned wider, half-moon of dust and shadow. One of them, younger than the rest, shifted uneasily in his saddle. Jonah Pike. His eyes flicked from Silas to the wounded Apache, then back to Harlan. "Sheriff," Jonah said carefully, "the law's supposed to be exact." Harlan shot him a glare sharp enough to cut skin. "Don't mistake my patience for permission, boy. You follow my lead." Still, The words hung there. Doubt tasted bitter even in silence. Harlan stepped closer. Behind Silas, Takoda's chest rose shallow but steady. Then he whispered one word in English, clear enough for all to hear. Takoda. The name stilled the air. One of the deputies muttered a curse under his breath. Harlan's jaw twitched, but he recovered quick. Then you are the one, the sheriff said. Wanted for Colonel Stanton's murder. Word is you staged the ambush, painted false war signs to fool soldiers, and left our peace in the dust. That right? Takoda's lips were dry, but his voice did not falter. Your colonel carried names. Names of men who trade rifles to ghosts and sell war like whiskey. He died because those names lived too long. The deputies shifted uneasily. Jonah's gaze sharpened, but Harlan's smile returned, thin and poisonous. A man in your shape will say anything to drag company into his grave. He reached for Takoda, but the warrior's hand moved first down to a pouch at his belt. His fingers trembled, yet when he drew it out, the gesture was deliberate. Not a weapon, a small leather satchel, stained with blood. Takoda held it not to Harlan, but to Silas. Water is life. You gave it. Now, carry truth. Silas hesitated. He could feel Harlan's stare like heat, yet he reached and closed his palm around the pouch. Inside, stiff paper pressed against something cool and metallic. Give that here, Harlan snapped, hand dropping to his revolver. Before Silas could answer, Jonah Pike dismounted. He walked slowly, hands open. Sheriff, if it's evidence, it belongs before a judge. Let Crowell hold it till then. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. He measured Jonah, as if deciding whether the boy's spine was strength or foolishness. Careful, deputy. Men who lean wrong fall hard. Jonah didn't flinch. So do men who burn the law they swore to keep. Tension thickened, a rope pulled tight. Then Harlan exhaled sharply, stepping back. Fine. Have it your way. Crowell comes with us. The Apache stays under guard. If he lives long enough, he'll hang. If not, less paperwork. Takoda's eyes burned, but he said nothing. His hand pressed the wound, and his silence carried more weight than any oath. The ride into town was slow, dust rising behind them like smoke. Silas kept the pouch hidden inside his vest, the metal band tucked against his arm. Every hoofbeat seemed to hammer the same question. Why him? Why trust a lonely rancher with the kind of truth that could set fire to a territory? Harlan rode close, his voice low. You think you're clever, Crowell. That pouch'll buy you nothing but a shorter rope. I know what Stanton carried, and I know what fools will do to keep their names off paper. Hand it over now, and maybe I call you careless instead of traitor. Silas didn't answer. He thought of Takoda's cracked lips, whispering water, of the gratitude in his eyes. Some debts you didn't pay by surrender. They reached town by dusk. Faces peeked from windows as Harlan led Silas through the street toward the courthouse. No one spoke. Folks had learned not to when the sheriff brought a man in. Inside, the air smelled of paper and sweat. Judge Winnett waited, eyes heavy with age and caution. Harlan laid out his story. Crowell found harboring a fugitive. Stanton's death pinned square on the Apache, and orders demanding swift justice. The judge turned to Silas. Is it true? Silas's chest tightened. He felt the paper against his heart, the silver pressing his skin. Some of it. A man bled at my well. I gave him drink. If that's crime, then I'm guilty. But Stanton's death isn't his doing. It's the doing of men who sell war and call it order. The room hushed. Harlan's face hardened. Judge, you hear him? Echoing the savage's lies. We can't waste breath on fairy tales. It has an boastit, all dured. But Jonah Pike stepped forward. Maybe we should. Sheriff, you remember that missing shipment of rifles? I saw them later in settler hands. Not stolen by Apaches. Stolen by someone closer. Murmurs rippled among the deputies outside the door. The story Harlan told had cracks, and cracks let light in. The judge frowned, eyes shifting from Jonah to Silas. "Do you carry proof of this?" Silas touched his vest. The pouch seemed to burn hotter against his chest. He could hand it over now, end the chase. But Takoda's warning echoed, "Do not be easy to read." "I have words," Silas said slowly. "And I have will. Proof lives where men are brave enough to keep it breathing. And I am prodations, and ket along this while of dull." Harlan's hand twitched at his pistol, then stilled. His smile returned, sharp and thin. "Judge, let me do my duty. Crowell can spin his sermons, but the rope listens better than I do." The judge leaned back, weary. "Sheriff, the law isn't rope, it's record. Bring me the Apache alive if you can. Until then, I'll hear more than one man's story." It wasn't acquittal, but it was delay. And delay was life. That night, as Silas sat on the courthouse bench, Jonah slipped beside him. "You know what's in that pouch?" Silas shook his head. "Only that men would kill for it. Then guard it like breath. Harlan won't stop. He's already planning to ride back and finish what Stanton started. If Takoda lives till dawn, it'll be a miracle." Silas stared at the dark window, the moonlight spilling like silver across the floor. Somewhere, out on his ranch, a wounded warrior waited under the stars, guarded by a man who had sold his soul long ago. The road between truth and silence had narrowed to a single line, and Silas Crowell knew before the next sunset he would have to choose which side to ride. Part 3. The Horn in the Dark. Night wrapped the ranch in one unhelpful shade. Hawkins sat by the well with his rifle across his knees. Jonah stood opposite, hat low, hands empty. Takoda lay between them, breath small but stubborn. When Hawkins jeered about singing to the night, Takoda answered that sometimes the night replied. Hawkins promised to shoot the reply. Jonah offered laudanum. Takoda refused. He had to hear. He spoke of his father Wicasa, patient until patience turned false, then iron. Not footsteps tonight, maybe the promise of them. Hawkins boasted he was the pocket where the sheriff kept his secrets. A horse shivered in the sheriff's corral, and the air thinned like a ridge. Takoda drew a small antelope horn from his collar. Hawkins raised the rifle. Jonah, unarmed by choice, only met Takoda's eyes. "Do it anyway." Takoda blew. The tone arrived like weather. Low, steady, bigger than argument. Hawkins fired flash, stone, harmless. Jonah kicked the crate, knocked the barrel off true, then smashed the lantern. Darkness fell hard. A second shot chipped the well lip. Horses screamed. Jonah dragged Takoda, making his body a roof until the shooting stopped. He whispered, "Will your father hear one horn?" Takoda lifted it again with a wince and blew. The note answered itself from somewhere farther off, like a knock inside a man's ribs. Down the road lanterns budded. Hawkins grinned the sheriff's glow. Jonah pictured Harlan at the front and knew what came next. "Time to do the job I meant to," he said, and slid Takoda into the root cellar. Hatch cracked for air. "You'll be called a traitor," Takoda warned. "Then I'll be called," Jonah answered. Harlan arrived with 3 men. Tidy hat, tidy grin. "Evenin', Hawkins. Our guest sing you lullabies?" He leaned over the well hatch. Jonah stepped in. "He needs a doctor. You fire down there, you get a corpse and a war." Harlan lifted a hand. Rifles followed. Then the horn answered again, far, patient, plural. Lanterns flowered along the ridge, just enough to say we're here. Riders curled a quiet ring around the yard. Wicasa walked in and set his palm on the stone. Takoda answered from below, one edged syllable that made a father exhale. Wicasa faced Harlan. You came to finish a lie, he said, English clean as steel. You will leave with a truth that has no need of you. Harlan said Takoda shot a colonel. Wicasa said Harlan sold one. Silas arrived on foot, breath ragged. Sam clinked along with a canvas sack. Dr. Kittering limped close, already cursing. Harlan eyed Silas's vest. Church or firewood? A mirror, Silas said. You'll see yourself when it's too late to tidy. Wicasa raised 2 fingers. The circle breathed tighter. Silas drew Stanton's letter, slid its edge into the silver band on his forearm, and read, names, dates, amounts, protective considerations, beside shipments that turned into rifles. A freighter's loss, that came home after a visit from a badge with a fat purse. Harlan's name where the sun couldn't bleach it. When he finished, the yard chose silence over lies. There it is, Harlan said softly. The book meant to walk me to Sunday school. He stepped once. Muzzles tilted. Silas said, Judge Winnett will take this with ceremony. Harlan warned that paper wouldn't survive the walk. I'll walk with him, Jonah said. Candle in a hurricane, Harlan smiled. Then I'll be wet and lit, Jonah answered. Kittering's head rose from the hatch. He'll live if we don't help him die. Boiling water, linen, quiet. Sam lowered a kettle, a wedding shirt. His courage. Wicasa told him, make water clean. Higher work than most men get. Harlan read the ring and whistled his men into retreat. Morning, he told Silas. After dawn, Judge. Me, your paper. You'd be surprised how much blessing a document can stand. You won't be there, Jonah said. Harlan mounted, without turning his back. He nodded once to Hawkins, once to Wicasa, recognition older than respect, and rode out. The circle opened, closed, and held. The yard remembered how to breathe. Water boiled. The doctor worked. Wicasa listened to stones. Jonah stood his post until standing felt like labor and kept doing it. East went from black to bruised to the gray that briefly flatters bad choices. At first light, Kittering climbed out, filthy and satisfied. He sleeps. If he wakes, he'll hurt. If he hurts, he'll live. If he lives, he'll bill us for another day we can't return. Wicasa looked at Silas's silver and the place the paper lay. Your water was the first choice. This is the second. Men who make 2 in a row are rare. Men who make 3 are stories. Be careful which you decide to be. The freighting dies. The crew. Silas looked to Jonah. We walk. They did no horses, no escort, just 2 men, a letter, and a morning willing to be made into something better than a report. At the gate, Wicasa touched Silas's shoulder. When you reach the judge, speak first. Men who lie like to speak first. Take that pleasure from him. They stepped into thin, clean light, dew wetting their boots. Behind them, under breathing wood and dirt, Takoda dreamed of water. The riders eased, then held. The circle learned to be wall and doorway at once. On the road, the letter's stiff edge tapped Silas's ribs. Silver cooled his skin. Wind pushed at their backs like a friend in a hurry. You scared? Silas asked. Not yet, Jonah said. I will be when we've done the brave part and the thinking starts. Good, Silas said. Let's get scared on the right side of the courthouse steps. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. The horn's memory stretched behind them like a line pulling the next hour into the shape it had to take. Ahead, the town bell began to ring, maybe by rope, maybe by wind choosing, for once, to take a side. Part 4. The town that heard its name. They took the road to town the way a man takes a vow quietly, because saying it loud would sound like boasting. Silas checked the letter under his vest as if confirming a heartbeat that wasn't his. The silver band on his forearm kept its cool like a secret, remembering who first told it. Jonah walked a half step left, eyes on rooflines and alleys where men with reasons wait for excuses. The courthouse sat at the bend like a lifted chin. Inside, the air smelled of timber, ink, and 1,000 heel turns. Judge Winnett came out rubbing his face, then stopped at the sight. One man wearing dust for armor, the other with blood for a cuff. "You've brought me something," he said. "A mirror," Silas answered. "It won't flatter." The doors swung again. Sheriff Malcom Harlan entered easy as a bad habit, 2 deputies in his shadow, Hawkins drifting in through a side aisle. Behind them, the town's spine, storekeepers, the schoolteacher, the saloon man, the telegraph operator pretending his hands belonged to someone honest. "Sit," Winnett said, surprising himself with the command in his voice. "Listen." Silas unfolded Colonel Stanton's letter. Paper crackled. People tried not to. He read names, dates, amounts, receipts dressed as favors, shipments labeled wire that arrived as rifles, protective considerations that bought silence, a freighter's loss that reappeared after a visit from a badge with a fat purse. Stanton's hand marched square and neat across the page. "Sheriff," the judge asked, "do you deny your name is there?" "I deny paper is the world," Harlan said mildly. "But my name? No. I was born to it." Jonah spoke. Crates relabeled, gold unearned, no Apache in sight, only the walk of a full pocket he'd watched for a year. Sam, the blacksmith's boy, rose on his toes to say he'd seen rifles shoved into barrels. The schoolteacher swore for Stanton's hand by the tails of his Fs. Winnett suspended Harlan, pending inquiry. "You put your hands on furniture and think it's a throne," Harlan said. "I stand on dirt." Before he could pull the room tighter, the telegraph operator blurted, "I sent a message last night. A suspension of pursuit, ordered by Harlan, receipt saved instead of burned." Eyes swung back to the letter, then to the sheriff. "Deputy," Harlan said, teeth gone from his smile. "Arrest Crowell. Hand me the paper." "No," Jonah said. Steel came up the way muscle remembers. Hawkins's rifle rose with tidy sin. Silas didn't move. "My father whipped me once for stealing a biscuit I could have asked for," he said to Harlan. "He told me a man will starve honest before he eats well crooked. You've eaten well, try hunger." The inner door opened. 2 gray-coated marshals, Aldous and Cranmer, and a black-frocked man with a limp and a valise. State's Advocate Ferris. Silas placed the letter in Ferris's palm. For a breath, the room became a church. "I request immediate sequestration of the sheriff's office," Ferris said, "and arrest of any deputy who—" Hawkins fired. The ball grazed Silas's knuckles and tore a corner from the letter. Jonah moved straight through the second shot, took it in the arm, and slammed both hands onto the page, pinning it like a snake. "Drop it," Aldous barked. Hawkins swung to run, and a woman in a blue dress no one would later name stuck out a foot. He met the floor. His rifle barked into the ceiling and killed only dignity. Cranmer was on him in a blink. Harlan's pistol hovered over consequence. He could buy 10 more heartbeats with murder. He chose afternoons instead and holstered. "Malcom Harlan," Ferris said evenly, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States, bribery, and perverting justice." A cool draft shouldered the side door. Wicasa stood framed by sun and dust and said only, "My son, he lives." Relief sat the room down hard. Winnett rapped once. "Recess until noon. I'll sign what wants signing and read what wants reading. We won't do this by halves and then call ourselves men." Outside, the town tried on cheer and folded it back. Ferris blanketed Stanton's letter in his valise. Marshals led Harlan away. He kept his shoulders loose, hat crease perfect, the part of him that still believed he'd write the afternoon. Silas met Jonah in the aisle. "You all right?" "Hurts like truth," Jonah said, crooked grin working. "Back to the ranch," Silas said. We stand by the well. At noon we see if the town keeps the shape it liked this morning. Sheriff owns afternoons, Jonah said. Then he rents this one, Silas answered. We'll make sure he can't afford it. They washed Jonah's arm at the freshet beyond the last house. The road climbed a low rise and dropped toward the ranch, the barn's shoulder, the door the doctor had left ajar, the well mouth bright as a poor man's rubbed coin. 2 riders broke from the mesquite, neither Harlan's nor Wicasa's fast, saddlebags fat, one hat low, one bareheaded with a hook scar at the lip. They cut for the porch like men who knew where a root cellar lid liked to hide. They ran not panic, but purpose. The yard bucked and then helped, as if the dirt had picked a side. Sam burst from behind the barn with a shovel like a spear. At the door, Dr. Kittering stood, sleeves rolled, scalpel bright, eyes so angry his limp forgot itself. "This is a sick room," he said, and made the word sound like country. Scarmouth smiled at flies and raised a pistol. Sam yelled and charged. The second rider fired wild and chipped the well. Silas hit him shoulder first. The pistol skipped. Jonah met the first man on the threshold and didn't draw. He hit fists. The last honest argument when the law is busy with adjectives. "Enough," Kittering thundered. The sound of a man who's saved more lives than he's been thanked for. Scarmouth blinked as if finding himself in a story that didn't flatter, and a horn answered from the flats. One low, patient note threaded the mesquite, reminding porchmen that circles close at the speed of consequence. Wicasa's riders arrived quiet, no paint, no holler hooves you hear because breathing makes room. They drew a half circle and made it whole. Scarmouth froze. The other man ran for the corral and met Sam's shovel blade in the only square inch that could trip a plan. He ate dirt and humility. Wicasa swung down, took in scalpel, boy, blood, well, strangers, sky. He pointed once. 2 riders pinned Scarmouth to his morning. A third hauled the partner up by the collar like a bad habit, finally getting ended. "Not Harlan's?" Silas asked. "Not his men," Wicasa said, flicking a glance at the heavy saddlebags. "His afternoons." "He lives," Kittering said before anyone could waste a question. "He'll live better if this racket stops pretending to be company." "There will be more afternoons," Wicasa said. "Then we'll keep buying them with mornings," Silas replied. "One after another, until someone else learns how." Jonah leaned on the jam, blue handkerchief gone honestly red. "We still have to walk back," he said. "We promised to speak first." "Says 7 people." Wicasa placed a palm on the well stones. "Then speak first," he said, no iron this time, almost a blessing. "And speak short. Truth that needs too many words is the kind Harlan knows how to tame." Silas cinched Jonah's bandage with the care a man saves for tools that don't fail him. "Stay," he told Sam. "Hold the circle. Keep the doctor in a good temper, and the strangers in a bad one." Sam nodded, taller than he'd been at dawn. They set out again. The horn's memory tugged noon their way. Dust rose and resettled with respect. The road felt shorter the way paths do when purpose, not distance, measures them. The courthouse bell rocked once, then again, as if the wind had finally chosen a side and, for once, decided to take it. Part 5. The Circle That Held. Noon pressed a hot hand on the rooftops when Silas and Jonah returned to town. Heat lifted off Main Street in wavering veils that made the courthouse quiver like a promise a man wasn't sure he could keep. The same faces from morning were on the steps, trying to look hopeful without letting go of suspicion. Inside, benches had filled the way a trough fills slowly. Then all at once, Judge Winnett sat coatless, sleeves rolled, as if posture could stand in for courage. Ferris rested a hand on his valise, the way a man settles a nervous horse. "We reconvene," Winnett said plain, on purpose. Ferris didn't thunder. He stacked small truths until they made a tower. A shopkeeper with invoices bigger than his shelves. a freighter whose memory got sharp under a marshal's hand, the telegraph operator who admitted the wire he sent, and the receipt he refused to burn. Jonah spoke steady as rope. Dates, places, sites he could own. The walk of a man with a heavy pocket. No rumor, no guess. The side door opened. Dr. Kittering entered, limp softened by purpose. Wicasa came beside him like weather. Between them, pale but upright, walked Takoda, one hand gliding the bench backs, as if greeting the wood. Ferris nodded. If you can speak, do. Takoda faced the judge. Then the flag. Then the bright window. My father and the colonel met at the bend, he said. Careful English. No flags make secrets loud. Riders dropped from the rim, faces masked, boots where moccasins should have been. They wore your boots, he told Harlan. They shot the one who carried names. They shot me because a list on paper does not die. Name them? Ferris asked. I can name the one who still has a choice, Takoda answered, letting his gaze rest on Harlan. Then he drew out the antelope horn and set it on the table with the care of a man laying down the last tool. He nodded toward Silas. You wear silver not of my people. Give me your arm. Silas rolled his sleeve. The hammered band slid home on warm skin. A vow, Takoda said. Not of blood, of water. You gave it. Keep giving, when thirst pretends to be law. Ferris's voice stayed level. The territory charges Sheriff Malcom Harlan with conspiracy to defraud the United States, bribery, extortion, obstruction. We move that he be remanded, his office sequestered. So ordered, Winnett said. Harlan stood with the mirror-practiced grace of a man who loved his own silhouette. No, he said lightly. Aldous and Cranmer moved. A rider's shot cracked from the doorway. Harlan's pistol spun to a child's shoe and stopped. The marshals took him low and high. Dust found his teeth again. You rent mornings, he said to the floorboards, smiling at nothing. Afternoons come back to me. He had barely finished when Scarmouth rose near the window with a cut-down shotgun aimed not at law or judge, but at the bandage on Takoda's chest. Hawkins, cuffed and off balance, shouted something between warning and regret. A woman in a blue dress stepped between barrel and wound, hands lifted like a wordless prayer. The pause she bought was 2 beats of a clock enough. Aldous pivoted, fired twice, crisp as measurement. The shotgun clattered. Scarmouth failed at dignity. Silence poured back into the room like well water into a pail fast, cold, filling corners first. Ferris closed his valise. Enough. Winnett struck the gavel once. Court stands at 2. Between now and then, signatures, reading. Make room for law to pass. On the steps outside, people descended with the careful tread of those leaving a church that for once hadn't embarrassed them. The schoolteacher polished her spectacles with cloth too fine for the task. The telegraphist touched his pocket where the saved receipt lived, like a man checking a wound. Sam tried standing taller and managed a little. Marshals brought Harlan out. A boy spit and missed on purpose. His mother cuffed him lightly. Hawkins limped behind, iron bright on his wrists, shame finally heavy. Ferris drew Silas into cottonwood shade. Witnesses sleep at the stage station tonight. Thicker walls than homes. Tomorrow I wire Santa Fe for a special term. There are men there who've been waiting to hear this without knowing it. Is the town safe in the meantime? Silas asked. Safer than it was, Ferris said. For the Gaps you've friends whose horses know how to be quiet. He nodded toward Wicasa's riders. Wicasa, looking at none of them and all of them, said, You won't be refused. A circle that kept 1 man breathing can keep 12 men honest. Keep the patient breathing, Kittering grunted, stumping past with his bag. The rest of you can conjugate virtue in the yard, and the any aereo in Baringos. It stood at Varios. They rode out to the ranch. As the afternoon lengthened like a sentence that refused to end, the yard held to its familiar shapes. Well mouth, barn shoulder, door ajar for air. 2 of Wicasa's riders had become bushes at the far fence, and now became men again. The captured strangers sat roped in the shade, faces set in the professional sullenness of men planning to practice again. Sam watched them with his shovel across his knees like an heirloom. "Any trouble?" Jonah asked. "Only the kind that looks like it wants to stand up," Sam said, proud of the line he'd saved for this moment. Kittering went straight inside and turned back into a machine for reducing pain. "Fever's thinking about it," he reported. "We make water and willow louder." On the porch, Wicasa laid a hand on the stone rim. Silas joined him. "My father used to say, in a crooked place, a decent man must choose between being tired and being wrong." "My father said the same with fewer words," Wicasa replied. "What do you do when tired wins?" "You drink," he said, touching the rim. "And remember, you are not the well." Near sundown, Ferris returned with a small caravan. Schoolteacher, telegraphist, shopkeeper, finally in his evening coat, reluctant freighter, 2 deputy marshals from the rail spur. "Stage stations too easy to find for men who claim nothing is easy," Ferris said. "We'll borrow your circle." "This is not a fort," Wicasa said. "It is a well. Wells are kept by manners as much as by stone." The guests nodded. Some sentences make better citizens than speeches. They ate beans with smoke for seasoning and bread cut thin enough that no one counted. The schoolteacher made Sam sit twice and praised him once. Praise stuck better. The telegraphist studied his cup and found only his face. The freighter tried a joke. Jokes refuse certain jobs. Night arranged itself. Riders at the fences, marshals by the door, townsfolk under the cottonwood where the air still moved. Someone set the horn on the table by the threshold. The act weighted the yard like a paperweight on a flapping page. Silas turned the silver with his thumb. "I don't know that I'm the right man for this." "For the band?" Wicasa asked. "For the promise. You became the right man when you didn't wait to feel like one," Wicasa said. "Promises dislike men who need comfort first." Kittering stepped into starlight. "He sleeps. If he wakes, he'll argue. If he argues, he's living." "Tomorrow?" Silas asked. "Afternoons," Wicasa said. "Then mornings," Silas answered. Morning arrived elbow first, shoving light into corners and persuading dust to glitter. Coffee forgave the old sins of its pot. The woman in blue ran the table with the brisk dignity of someone who could organize a flood. When Silas thanked her, she said, "Spend thanks where it's needed. Today, spend it on standing." Ferris's clerk unrolled fresh paper. "Depositions," she said. "Memory is a poor steward. Paper pays." Sam's statement ran smoother now that he knew his creek stones. The schoolteacher's was stitching tight. The telegraphist spoke once without apologizing and seemed taller for it. The freighter tried to soften. The clerk's pen made a sound that discouraged softness. Silas told it straight well. Cup, horn, circle, letter, cuffs, no varnish. By noon the yard looked like a dignified camp. One rider repaired a bridle under the cottonwood. Another taught Sam to hold a rope in a way that hurt less when it did its job. The woman in blue sliced bread to the exact thickness, where fairness meets hospitality. Aldous arrived with dust on his hat and news on his tongue. "We move Harlan at dusk. Not the main road, cotton breaks and slew. He used to complain about that route. He'll get his wish. Grass forgives honest steps," Wicasa said. "We'll ride near enough to correct mistakes, and far enough that no man blames us for his own. In never on bisting. And the extravly 8 men. And the storgin that bisting." They saddled when shadows stretched long and rode toward town. Marshals, advocate, the clerk with papers bound tight, 2 riders ghosting the flanks, Silas and Jonah, where a man would look if he wanted to see where the courage was supposed to be. People watched from porches and windows, some braced for disappointment, some holding hats in both hands, as if courtesy might make law work better. Harlan had learned to make posture a speech and silence quotation marks. "Gentlemen," he said, measuring the road like a tailor measuring a customer who intends to outgrow his clothes. "We'll take a walk," Aldous said. "And unlike some walks," Ferris added, "this one knows where it ends." It not was. They didn't take the road that bragged about its axles. They took the humble cuts through cotton and water and patience. Wicasa road where a man could deny he was being guarded and still feel it. Harlan glanced once at the big road and saved the glance for later. At the bend where the river practiced shade, they halted canteens tasting of tin and stubbornness, checks on cuffs and horses. Harlan looked toward the place Takoda had named, and, for one unguarded moment, wore the face of a man who cannot explain himself to himself. It passed. Men like him don't keep company with moments they can't use. They turned back into a sky, learning its colors properly. Lamps winked behind curtains. Porches filled. When the column reached the courthouse, there were fewer whispers and more nods. Not joy practice. Silas and Jonah peeled off at the livery. They rode out under a light that belonged equally to First Star and Last Chore. At the ranch, lantern glow made the circle look smaller and feel larger. Kittering stood in the doorway, hair honest with disorder. "He sleeps. He woke long enough to insult my stitch and forgave me by breathing." The woman in blue pressed a tin cup into Jonah's good hand. "You did what you meant. Don't get entitled to it." Silas went to the well. The rope sang. The bucket kissed stone. Water rose cold enough to teach courtesy. He drank, filled two more, one for the deputy learning to be braver than his job, one for the man asleep inside, whose vow didn't speak court language, and set a third by the door, like the night before, because some habits deserve to be kept until they stop needing effort. Wind moved the mesquite and didn't steal anything. Stars found their places like men learning lines in a play they hadn't auditioned for, but intended to perform well. The silver on Silas's forearm looked less like jewelry and more like punctuation holding the sentence where it mattered so the story wouldn't slide off the page. That night, the circle held, and in the morning the bell would test its rope, papers would take signatures, and the town would try, again, to keep the shape it liked about itself. Some would forget, some would remember. Water would go from bucket to cup to mouth, and the vow would work without needing its name. When night closed, the well kept the taste of its water, patient, and the silver band on Silas's arm lay quiet, like a period set in the right place holding the story to the page. Harlan went off toward his own sunset, and the town, for the first time in years, practiced a new shape. Paper before rumor, vows before fear. The horn was silent now, but the circle it summoned held loose enough to open, strong enough to shelter. By morning, the bell would test its rope, pens would find their pages, and water would pass from bucket to cup, each pour a reminder, a promise carried through to the end. Some would forget. Others would remember, the way wind crosses a yard without taking anything. And if one day you ride this red dust road and see a tin cup resting on a well's rim, know that some covenants need no name, only continuance. If this tale spoke to you, subscribe to stay with the circle. More chapters, more trails, and more mornings paid for with courage. Turn on notifications, leave a comment, and share the story so the well never runs dry.